and Jason Tatum. And I gotta say, I used to hate LeBron a lot more because I was a big fan of the big three Celtics. So when we had Garnett, Pierce, and Allen, LeBron was coming up and he was like, I hope he's not as good as they say he is. And then he was. And then the big three with the Heat destroyed us. So
true story, though. My dad grew up in Indiana. So I grew up a Celtics fan because he was a huge Larry Bird fan. So even though I liked the Cavs, now I don't like the Celtics anymore, but I grew up a huge Celtics fan because of Larry Bird.
I was just going to celebrate with you because I don't know if you heard, but we are the current NBA champions. Were you aware of this fact that we just won better 18? Did you know?
Yeah, I know. You ran us over in the playoffs.
We sure did. That was you won one. We only swept the Pacers.
Yep.
You're undefeated. You're undefeated right now.
We're playing well. We're playing well.
Better than Celtics. Hey, welcome America to Unscripted. On Unscripted, what we do is we try to educate and entertain by covering the news of the day. Then we interview the best and the brightest that LinkedIn has to offer. Today's guest is Mike Abernathy. He is the CEO of Buckeye State Credit Union. Welcome to the show, Mike.
Hey, thanks for having me, man.
No problem. So what we're gonna do after we cover the news is I'm gonna ask you about your three favorite bands, movies, and books in an attempt to humanize corporate America through the magic and power of stupid questions. But before we get to that, we're going to get to the news. But before we get to the news, I don't know if you know this, but every day in the United States is some reason to celebrate. Every day is a national day. It's not necessarily Thanksgiving or Christmas or Easter. Some days it's just National Roasted Nut Day or National Cupcake Day. Today, though, is National Dream Destination Day. How very oddly specific of a day. Now, you live in Ohio, so you're already in what many people consider their dream destinations. But is there anywhere else in the world you would go on your perfect dream destination?
Probably Puerto Rico, man. Just go somewhere warm. Get away from this cold weather.
Cold does suck. Does it snow much in Ohio? It snows a lot in Massachusetts.
I'll tell you what, I'm up close to Lake Erie. And when the winds come off and you get that lake effect snow, you don't want to be anywhere near it.
That's the thing too. So, all right. I'm going to tie this all together. I lived in, I'm an Army brat. So I graduated high school in South Korea and it doesn't snow much there, but it has a very specific kind of cold. I think maybe because the air has moisture in it or something. It's like bone chillingly cold. So it doesn't necessarily have to snow somewhere for it to like hurt your soul. The other thing is, if you were going to ask me about my dream destination, I think it has to be Thailand, not for the sex trafficking, but because I want to point that out. Because, all right, so I've lived in Korea and Korean food is unbelievable. Now, if you have Korean food in the United States, it's very good. It's close, but not perfect. So I love shitty American Thai food. How much better must it be in actual Thailand? I think probably a lot, right?
Yep.
And then I had some other, really the only reason I want to go on vacations, I don't really care about the weather, but I do want to eat. So I just wish that I wish I was hungry all the time on vacation. I think that would make things just like, I don't really care about architecture. I don't hike. I don't want to be outside. I just want to eat all the time. So I don't know if science could work on that. Just make me mildly hungry all day long.
Oh yeah. Authentic Mexican. I've been to Cozumel and I went on some weird excursion in Cozumel where, my God, they gave me keys to a Jeep Wrangler down there, which they didn't even do a background check on me, but they took me into some Mayan ruins in the middle of nowhere. And they gave us beers, which was pretty funny and
so
allowed us to drive.
Keys to a vehicle and some beers. Oh,
yeah.
Man,
but they took us to some little village and they cooked for us. And there is no Mexican restaurant in the United States that can match what they actually do in the country where they're at. So I am completely with you on native food and native cooking. So absolutely 100% agree on that.
I mean, thank God we live now, because if you were alive 300 years ago, zero chance if you were, in the middle of the United States as a Native American, you'd had spaghetti and meatballs. It just didn't fucking exist. So now we have a lot, but still I covered this story on the show months ago, but there was some Japanese chef that wanted to expand his palate. So he moves to Mexico, gets introduced to tacos, goes back to Japan, and now his taco stand in Japan has lines that are miles long. So like we just take certain things for granted because there's Taco Bells in every corner, and like Mexican food, proper Mexican food has infiltrated the United States. There's still countries out there that have never had a burrito in 2024. It's crazy.
It's wild.
It's wild. We live in wild times. All right, let's get to a little bit of news so we can talk about your music, movies, and books. Okay. This came up today from our friends at Axios. Spotify projects first full year of profitability ever. I find this fascinating because Spotify has been in business for 18 years and they finally turned a profit. That's remarkable, I think. So they not only a profit, but their quarter earnings this quarter was 454 million euro. How do you go from negative? I mean, you're in the banking industry. Does this make any sense to you? 18 years without a profit, and then all of a sudden you're crushing to the tune of almost $500 million.
Well, I'd assume the presidential election, having your presidential candidate and your vice presidential candidate might have spiked some subscriptions and some views. So that might not have hurt coming into the end of the quarter.
Interesting. Well,
or end of the month.
It could have. Here's the other thing too. So they did I'm obsessed with this. Like, where were they 18 years ago? And they have this Flickr page where they show, like, this started in some dude's apartment, Spotify. That's them playing the Wii in the upper right-hand corner. That's them playing the foosball. That's very like 2006, which when people were doing that. And Spotify, I'm sort of using Spotify as the Kleenex version of tissue. Really, like, streaming music has just fundamentally changed the way we listen to music. So I pulled these numbers from ChatGPT. In 1995, 714 million CDs were sold. That's a lot of CDs. Today, I know physical media is dead, but only 27 million last year. Wait a
minute, they actually sold 27 million CDs last year?
Shocking, right? That who the fuck is still buying CDs? That's unbelievable. Right. But also, I miss the days of, like, all right, I missed 8 tracks and vinyl, but I came up in the cassette era. I used to love the smell of the cassette, the feel of the cassette, the liner notes and the thing. CDs too have a soft spot in my heart. I miss physical media. As great as Spotify is, and you have instant access to everything in the world, I miss CDs. I miss cassettes. It feels different.
I don't miss trying to get the wrapper off of it. That was a pain in the rear end to get the wrapper off of it.
And I hated when people didn't rip the entire wrapper off. Like, I'd go to friends' houses and I'd see like they just took off just enough to get to the CD. I'm like, will you clean this shit up? It looks like trash.
Agreed.
Like, the idea of listening to an entire album, obviously it was more prevalent in the cassette days because you couldn't skip to individual tracks. You could fast forward. But I don't know. I just think the way we consume it's different, which means probably the way they're recorded's different. Like, just sitting down and listening to a full CD or a full cassette doesn't feel like things people do anymore. And it was just such a big part of my upbringing, you know?
Well, you don't get to sample all of the different sound, and you don't get to sample everything that the artist puts together. You know, you get what is considered maybe their A track. You know, what's the best that they can put out. And it's hard for those artists because, you know, a lot of times when they would put those albums out, you know, the stuff that would reach the radio, yeah, that's their best stuff, but they would experiment with stuff in between. Yeah. And every once in a while they would catch fire with something with maybe a different sound that might lead to a next album. They don't get that opportunity anymore because it either lands or it doesn't. And they're going to go through different test groups to see if a song is really good. So they're missing. The modern artist is missing a great opportunity that the past artists had, which is put out a cassette. And, oh, by the way, if you want to get to a song that you got to go through 4 songs to get to it.
Right.
And so you're going to have to kind of figure out, maybe I like a couple of these songs in between. And that kind of tells, you know, the record label and the artist, hey, we got something here that's in between that maybe we didn't expect.
That's an excellent point, that the physical media forced you in many cases to listen to 3 or 4 songs before you got to the thing that was on the radio. And so your point, the most like the fringe argument I always use for this is Dark Side of the Moon was Pink Floyd's 8th album. 8th. And everything prior, sort of, you know, Syd Barrett was the lead singer. It wasn't what we know Pink Floyd to be. But whoever was the record label, they were like, guys, you got something here. Just keep doing it, keep doing it, keep doing it. And after Dark Side came everything that we know Pink Floyd is. Artists don't get that opportunity these days to make 7 experimental albums to find themselves. And where would we be without Pink Floyd?
We'll leave that there.
But this is shocking just in terms of Spotify numbers. 640 million monthly users. 252 million premium subscribers. I am one because I hate commercials with every fiber of my being. And they have over 4 million artists on the platform. It's just shocking at like a macro level that they had all this going for them. And it took 18 years to turn a profit. business is crazy.
It's very strange that you have those business models. It's taking so long because you could say the same thing about Uber. You know, if you look up Uber hasn't turned a profit either.
It's right. Like these investors have to be patient as hell. But then all of a sudden you're making $500 million a quarter. So obviously it paid off, but who's going to sit around for 18 years to wait for $500 million a quarter?
Oh, no kidding. These venture capitalists, they see something that the rest of us aren't seeing.
Obviously. Well, they have the money to see it too.
Right.
All right. Next up, this was a sort of it's funny and it's scary at the same time. This is from the Wall Street Journal. So this is so human, it's scary. My day alone talking to bots that sound like us. So this journalist, Joanna Stern, she strapped 4 chat bots onto the, like, if you look in the lower left-hand corner, she made sort of a quad pod, and she put a phone with Gemini, Google's Gemini, Microsoft's Copilot, ChatGPT, and Meta AI's voice-activated bot system. And then she brought it on a weekend away. So she did yoga with it. She asked it how to start a fire. She asked it for meatball recipes, although none of them could set a timer. Part of the idea here is it's jokey, it's rudimentary. She asked it how to, so the part of the fire was, she was like, you got to go get kindling. So then she went to the woods with an axe, and they couldn't really, except for I think it was Copilot, talk to her glasses and then could tell her which branches to cut down that would make good kindling, which is conceptually bizarre. That also has, in the upper right-hand corner, you can customize the voice. So I don't know if you can see it, but Aquafina's number one, then John Cena, Judi Dench, Kristen Bell. So I think now this is sort of a jokey ha-ha thing, but I think, have you seen the movie Her? Are you familiar with it?
I have not.
Okay, well, it's about Joaquin Phoenix's character sort of falling in love purposely with this chatbot, more advanced than this, but it's Hollywood. I think we cover on this show a lot the loneliness epidemic. There's sort of like males tend to be lonely. There's a lot of incels. This seems like, oh, just have a chatbot that'll talk to you, and it's your friend and it's your girlfriend. I don't think that's the right way to approach this. I think it's saccharine and fake, and I think it's going to hurt people more than it's going to help them. What do you think?
This is wild.
Yeah,
but I agree. We're getting into a society where, and COVID really accelerated this, where you just kind of separated people and you locked them in their houses. And, you have a generation of kids now that all they do is stare at a tablet or a phone. And it's very interesting because I'm seeing it with my own kid. Is she'll play games and she's interacting with AI. And we were concerned you're interacting with strangers. And then I get into the game and no, it's an AI she's interacting with.
Right.
And it's very bizarre. And now to see something like this, where you have an actual human being, instead of going camping with friends, having a good time, having a campfire, sharing stories, remembering good times and making new good times, it appears by the picture she took 2 phones with 4 AIs. And to me, that is just losing the entire human experience of being with other people, and you're replacing it with something that's not real.
Yeah.
And you're talking to a database somewhere. And that's unfortunate.
It's horrifying too. So I think that there's a lot that goes into this. Part of, I think, in the zeitgeist now is a sort of celebration of introvertedness. And I think introverts are like, oh, we're the most interesting ones. We just don't talk, and leaving my house is terrible. Like, okay. But also what that leads to is like crippling depression and fucking loneliness. Isolating yourself from other humans, I know it's like cool and popular right now, is not good. We are pack animals in our DNA. The other thing is, this is easy. This is easy interaction because the AI you're never going to have conflict with. It's going to be this thing where people go like, I like dogs more than people. Of course you do, because they love you no matter what. It's not a complicated relationship, but complication leads to fulfillment in many ways. So thank God I live in a neighborhood. Every day when my kid comes home, 3 other kids get off the bus. They go outside. There's a lot of fighting. They're in 2nd grade. There's fighting, they hit each other, they cry, but they're learning conflict resolution. They're learning how to get along with other humans. They play outside and they get dirty. Like, that's awesome. That's what it used to be. And I know like modern life is like, we lament what we have and things that were better in the past. That's definitely one of them. Hanging out with other humans as children instead of talking to chatbots or spending all your times in front of a tablet, objectively better. You have to do it. That's what life is going to be.
you can't improve as a human if you don't have conflict.
Right?
And I know that is so contrary to what people believe, but the thing that, let's think about this country as a whole. You don't get the United States without conflict, because everybody just thinks in 1776 they wrote the Declaration of Independence, and they went out there and they fought the British and everything was a-okay after that. No, they couldn't even figure out how to form a government after that. Beating the British was just the first step. Man, they could not agree on how to form a government, and they were fighting duels over how to, like, you think that we are divided right now and we're angry at each other now? I mean, go back into the 1780s and check it out. They were killing each other over this.
Yeah.
But they had to go through that conflict, and they were able to bridge, they were able to fix the divides, because they forced themselves to go through the conflict, and they knew they had no other choice. They had no choice but to face their differences, go through the conflict, and find a resolution. And it created the greatest country ever created. And what is really hurting this country now is really this AI, social media, and this not getting together anymore. Why? Because it's so easy to get behind a screen and be a troll and be anonymous and not face the consequences of being a troll, and starting conflict from 100 or 1,000 miles away, and not face the conflict and actually try to resolve the issue. And this is why, just from a week ago, you are seeing this complete breakdown of mental illness, because you don't have anybody who even wants to address how to address the mental illness in the breakdown, because we have a society now that has avoided conflict for so long, and they don't want to address it. And this is a huge, huge problem of the mental illness that we are facing in this country. And until we can get together and say, look, there are differences, it doesn't mean it's the end of the world, but we have to sit here and come to the resolution and say, this is where we stand. The other side, this is where we stand. And we need to come together and find that resolution together. Until we do that, like they did all the way back, there is just going to be this angry divide that is never going to come back together. But we have to slowly figure out, how do we get away from the death trolling on a computer screen or a phone screen or a tablet screen, and actually get in front of each other again and find a way to resolve this.
And the horrifying thing is it's going to be like on both sides, where you can be an absolute asshole troll because there's no consequences on one side, and then talk to your AI bot that says everything's fine,
Right.
This saccharine fake relationship with a robot. So you're never going to learn how to really deal with each other, have solve problems in your relationship. Here's the other thing too, like the incel movement. Everybody's like, oh man, chicks don't want us. I'm telling you this, talking to a robot all day is not going to help you with women. So it's just
you're trying to project a fantasy that's not real.
Right. Robots aren't your friends. Go get
Nope.
some real friends. There's other humans out there that are desperate. And this seems like the obvious, easy answer. Oh, just teach a robot how to be human, and they'll be your best friend. And it's not going to work. It's going to be horrible. Oh, man. Oh, speaking of which, I mean, I guess there's some synergy here. So this was, this is in the Wall Street Journal too. Making fun of men in China comes at a cost. So this is all about, I guess we can just go right from the article. As content focused on women is becoming increasingly popular in China, it's also drawing flack from men and causing headaches for Chinese companies. Last month, e-commerce giant JD.com cut ties with female comedian Yang Li after a promotional campaign triggered intense backlash from male customers, including some who threatened to stop shopping on the app. At the heart of the criticism appears to be Yang's mildly sarcastic poke at men in 2020, where she said, "Why are men so mediocre and yet so confident?" This, to me, it's beautiful because it shows the worldwide fragility of the male ego. You're dude, you're gonna fucking laugh at yourself. You're gonna talk about Patton as one of your favorite movies later.
Yeah.
Okay, men. I say this all the time because I'm dealing, in life. You run into a lot of guys who have anxiety problems, and I don't want to make light of that. But dude, men used to fight in actual wars. Now a female comedian sort of pokes fun at you, and you don't shop on a website anymore. That is very, very fragile of the male ego, and I wish we would stop doing shit like this.
Yeah, it's stupid. and we got to be more thick-skinned. But I think it goes deeper than that, though, and I think that some of it comes from the accumulation. If it's kind of just a one-off, man, there's no problem. It bounces off. I think there's a point where again, I don't care. You don't care. But there is a point where there has been an accumulation, especially over, a period of time where it's just piled up. And there's got to a point where a segment of men have just said, I'm done. I'm done being the enemy. I'm done being, villainized. And you know what? If I'm going to continue to be villainized, what is my only recourse? And my only recourse is I won't do business with you then. What else can I do? Because, they can't, the one thing that that men can't do is they can't go and be physically aggressive about it. They have self-control. Mm-hmm. And so these are just kind of the things that they're saying, what can I control? I don't necessarily agree with that, but I can understand the perspective sometimes. Me, it's going to bounce off me. I have a lot of patience and I have a lot of thick skin, but I can understand where, look, if it's been piling up and we're seeing that villainization over years and years and years, and it's not just one person making a joke or one person making a comment, but it turns into dozens and hundreds and thousands. And we've seen it in our culture for several years now, where you're telling young men, take a step back. What's the big popular term the last several years? Toxic masculinity. We've heard that a lot, and you're discouraging a lot of young men. So that's a hard thing for a lot of men to hear. So not that again, thick skin here, bounce off me. I'm not going to protest it. I'll go buy whatever, because if I need it, I need it. But I can empathize with folks that have just said, I've had it. This is the only route I have to protest, then that's how I'll protest.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those. Here's what I have a problem with is there's this beautiful Jon Stewart thing where he's speaking somewhere and somebody asked him if he went too far with something. And he goes, why are comedians the ones that go too far? What about the people that go to war? What about the people that pass shitty legislation that make sure that if you have a heart attack, you lose your house? Like the idea that a comedian is ground zero, in the reason it is because it hurts your feelings. And your feelings are the thing that you get very precious about. So I hate that we live in this time where everyone's offended about everything. And then when we have the people that shouldn't be offended, right? Like the tough guys, you're crying about shit too. So the audacity to be like, we live in a world that's too soft. And then somebody goes, you're mediocre. You go, well, I'm not going to shop there anymore. Then you're just proving their point, you know? So it's hard conceptually for me to wrap my head around this idea that, yeah, we are real manly men, but then you can't be lightly teased by a comedian without, losing your shit. Come on.
No, I get it.
It's just playing into this, you're too soft. No, I'm not. You're mediocre. And then you're crying.
Oh yeah. No, I 100% get it. It's one thing where I can see it and I can empathize with it, but that's not the route I'm going to take.
I think it's one of those things where it's true across the board. If the only people that can take your power are the people that you allow to take your power. So
100%.
If you're
100%.
So if you're allowing this to bother you, and then it's your fault.
Yep. You can listen. It comes down to this. It's at R. What is it? E plus R equals O. The event plus your response equals the outcome. You control your response. Yeah. And so to me, whatever happens, I'm going to control how I respond. And at the end of the day, as a CEO of a company, I have a bunch of employees who are watching to see how I respond. And if I respond fearful, panicky, if I'm going to be thin-skinned and I'm going to get very frustrated or I'm going to get frazzled, that does not inspire confidence to them, and they're not likely to follow me. Yeah. It's very important that I hold my composure, and that, they need to understand and feel like, hey, Mike's got this under control. He's a guy that he's going to have the answer. in that moment, I may not have the answer, but boy, they better feel like I'm going to have the answer, right? And that's the part of when the event happens, my response in front of them is going to dictate what that outcome is going to be.
Like, for example, I live in Massachusetts, but I live in semi-Western Mass. So Trump didn't win here, but he almost split the vote. So I think this is sort of Trumpy Massachusetts. I'm pretty liberal, but so my kid plays soccer. He's in 2nd grade. A lot of the 2nd grade boys are very into soccer. They play at recess. They're very aggressive on the field. They're still mixed gender at this point, and they're just they go very hard. There's a lot of kids that are very good. So the parental response to this, thank God, wasn't let's say you got to go easy. They go, why don't we pull them out and make their own league so they can just fucking murder each other? I go, yes, that's a reasonable thing to do. Not to soften them, but go, all right, listen, you're playing physical, you're playing hard. You can't beat up on the little kids. Just go beat up on each other. I'm like, oh, but you would think in the American zeitgeist now, they'd be like, listen, guys, you have to take it easy. No, just the solution is not always A or B. Sometimes it's C, D, E, F. There are other options, one of which is, all right, let a comedian. She made a joke. I don't have to cry about it. Stop crying about what comics say, please. The world would be a better place.
Comedy is meant to suspend disbelief and have a good time.
Right.
Go laugh.
Most comedians, they don't think of a joke and go, oh, I can't say that. It's too real. They're just trying to make you laugh. It's an act. It's something occurred to them that's funny. They're going to say it to shock and provoke you and hopefully get a chuckle. Nobody gets mad at actors. It's a performance. Like, oh my God. Oh, anyway.
Quit clutching your pearls.
Yes, stop. Anyway, all right. So speaking of media and entertainment, this is the section of the show where we're going to talk about your favorite music, movies, and books. All righty. Number 1, these guys, I got to say, there's 2 bands that live on this list. One is the Beatles. The other, Foo Fighters. Shoot, everybody loves Foo Fighters. And you do too. Why?
I grew up in that 80s, 90s era. And so naturally that first great band I loved was Nirvana.
Yeah.
And so you can see in this picture, you got Dave Grohl, got Pat Smear.
Yep.
Both
Pat
were
Smear,
Nirvana guys.
Pat Smear is like the greatest name of all time.
Right. And so, I just really transitioned once Nirvana just kind of dropped. I really just transitioned into Foo Fighters. And I didn't realize just really how talented Dave Grohl was. And really enjoyed their music. And I think it was 2017. They came to Ohio. They came to Akron. I went to a concert, and just the energy, you get their music and the music's really good, but the energy they brought was just completely different in person. And it gave me a different perspective because I've heard music on the radio and heard them online. And then you go to a concert and you can tell when they're kind of phoning it in. They're on tour and they're just trying to get through it. These guys don't phone it in. They come in and they hit it hard. They bring the energy. They're completely into what they're doing. And like you could see the picture here, like this is what he's like on tour. He's nuts. And you feed off of energy. And I'm a big believer in that. And so when you know what the energy of the person is, it also gives you a different perspective to the music. And so when I listen to Foo Fighters now, I have a different perspective and I appreciate it more. And I just thoroughly enjoy it.
Did you hear the small twist of fate thing that caused him to get back into music? The Ireland trip. Did you ever hear this thing?
I did not.
So Dave Grohl, after Kurt Cobain's death, he's obviously devastated. His band is broken up. He's not sure he wants to continue on with music, blah, blah, blah. So he takes a trip to Ireland, rural, nothing Ireland. He just wants to fucking get away from everybody. So he rents a car. He's driving around in desolate, just fucking sheep fields. Nobody. He sees a hitchhiker. He's like, all right, let me go pick this kid up. Goes to the hitchhike. One dude, he's wearing a fucking Kurt Cobain shirt. So at that point, Dave Grohl goes, that's when I realized I could never escape it. I just, this is who I am. This is what I have to do. He left the hitchhiker. He went home and he started Foo Fighters. And that kid has corroborated the story. There's a great clip on YouTube where they're both telling the story from their perspectives. So it's 100% real. Dave Grohl is very passionate about life, I think, too. Have you seen Sound City, where he buys the Sound City panel? It's a great documentary.
I've not watched it from start to finish. I've started it, stopped, started it again. But I've watched bits and pieces of it, but I've never got to go from start to finish with it.
Yeah. So Nirvana was like, that was when Nevermind came out. What a beautiful 5 years of music that was. Cause like, when we had the monoculture, everybody listened to everything. So like the Chronic, Doggy Style, the Black Album, Nevermind. It was just like a hit. Guns N' Roses' Use Your Illusion came out those same years. It was like, oh my God, so much. And we were buying the CDs and listening to the whole thing. And it was just, what a time to be alive.
It was awesome.
It really was. And then Foo Fighters, Dave Grohl is just, he recorded the entire first album by himself. He played every single instrument. He's just a very musical, very passionate guy. And for so long, I just thought they weren't doing enough rock and roll-y things. But then he had a kid out of wedlock. Tyler Hawkins dies of an OD. So I was like, oh shit, they were a real rock and roll band. Because they're considered like dad rock these days, which is kind of sad. But the problem is we're becoming fathers. Those of us who lived through grunge are all parents now.
And I mean, it's, the guy's obviously made mistakes, and he's lived through some tough stuff. So he's to the point now. It's like, can he continue to overcome? And the next couple of years, we're going to see what he's made of.
Yeah. But I mean, just he's drummed on. He drummed for Queens of the Stone Age. Like he's got a bunch of metal stuff going on. He's just, I don't know, very musical, very passionate guy. Can't hate Dave Grohl that much. Okay. The next here's where we diverge. Here's your boy. Kenny Chesney. All right. I'll give it middle America loves this shit. Sadly, so does everybody these days. This new country thing, which I'm not, he predates a little bit, but it still sounds the same. It's very popular right now.
Kenny is more. It's more of kind of a love note to my wife and our relationship. I will, full disclosure, before my wife, I didn't like any of this crap. I grew up in rural Ohio. And I had resisted country music. I thought, every song was about some dude losing his wife and losing his dog and picking a banjo. And it was all just this, getting in my pickup truck type of songs. Yeah. And then, as my wife and I have been together 15 years. Nice. And, as we've gone through the years, Kenny Chesney has been a very much like a lot of the songs kind of just hit home with us, the goods, the bads, the difference, some of the experiences we've had, follow along. Listen, other than the tractor, I'd never freaking drive a tractor. The tractor sexy crap, he can leave that. But a lot of the different songs, it was very much, it really struck our relationship. And so it had much more of an emotional hit with me, and look, the music's good. And obviously, middle America and Southern America love this guy. He's good looking dude, likes to party, very charismatic. Music's, obviously, solid. But for me, it was more of a, this is a connection for my wife and I.
Gotcha. Well, that's sweet. Actually, I think I mentioned in the email, there's a connection with my wife and I with your next band, but I want to stay on Kenny Chesney for 1 second. I know that he's probably not exactly what's out there right now that I can't escape. But he sort of sounds vaguely the same. So this is because I discuss music on this show a lot. It occurred to me that you can like music in retrospect. Like I love Led Zeppelin. Obviously I wasn't alive when Zeppelin was coming out, but it's very difficult to hate in retrospect. So disco, for example, disco meaningless to me because I'm like, fucking just turn the channel. Then it occurred to me that when you were living in the 70s, you probably couldn't escape disco. That's why you hate it. That's why I hate this stuff. I can't escape it. It permeated like every time I go to a brewery, every time I go to a restaurant, if my wife forces me to go to the beach and I have to fucking drink around somewhere, they're playing this shit. And somebody should study this sonically. I don't know why it bothers me so much. It just fucking, I immediately get mad. So this is what I do every time somebody does like one of these new country guys. I ask for the lyrics where they sing about jeans, because inevitably there's like 10 songs that have the lyric. No one sings about pants more than fucking country music artists. So I'll tell you the songs I listen to. There was American Kids has jeans in it. Wild Child has jeans in it. She Knows has jeans in it. So I forced myself for the show to listen to those. But then this is where I'm going to get a little soft on Kenny Chesney. I saw the video for Don't Blink. And because I'm going through a mild midlife crisis, that permeated my hatred. Because the video, it starts out with a 102-year-old, and then he's showing the kids growing up, and I have an 8-year-old and a 4-year-old. And then, it's sad. So he broke me a little with
Oh yeah, it broke my wife because my stepson got married a couple years ago, and that was the song that my wife and his son danced to, and that was Niagara Falls all over the place. So I get it.
I didn't quite cry, but I'm like, oh fuck, I ain't dying. Like, I'm 44. I'm clearly more than halfway dead. In the last 10 years, it's gonna be garbage anyway. So I was like, oh man, it does go by fast. Your guy's onto something there. Oh, all right, Kenny, I'll give you one. You get one. This band, Creed. This is, if there's any picture that encapsulates the late 90s, early 2000s, it's this goddamn cover of Spin magazine.
Yep.
So you tell you why do you love Creed, and then I'll do my Creed thing.
So obviously I'm the same age as you. I'm 44.
Yep.
And so late high school, going into college, through college, this was the band, right? Yeah. They were red hot in that era. And then, no lie, Scott Stapp just he collapsed and just became a mess, and he fell off the planet.
He sure did.
The music was great. I loved the music. And then the resurgence. And I wasn't quite buying it. And so my son's like, hey, do you know Creed's back? I was like, yeah, I heard that. I don't know if I'm buying it. This kind of feels like maybe they're going to be going around some bars or whatever. He goes, no, they're down in Cincinnati. And it's like going to be like 20-some thousand folks. I got front row tickets. You want to go?
Front row tickets to Creed, huh?
Yeah. I'm like, listen, I'm trying to avoid this concert. And I'm like, man, this is a 23-year-old kid asking me to go to this concert with him. Yeah. Like, don't you have any buddies who want to go to this thing? And he's like, man, this is your era. You should go to this thing. Yeah. And I finally give in, and I'm sitting here like, man, is there any way out of this thing? And there's not. And I make the 3-hour drive down to Cincinnati, and we get in there, and Three Doors Down opens for them, which they were awesome. Another from
First time I heard Three Doors Down was at a strip club. This is we're dating ourselves. Fantastic.
But yeah, right in our era again.
Yep.
But Creed comes out, and they play for 90 minutes. And it was awesome. Like, he was fantastic. Sounds exactly the same. And he was great. And he blew all my expectations away. So I'm sitting here thinking, is this guy really clean? Is this guy really, back? Or is this a quick cash grab? Is he just in a bad spot where he needs to just go off of, some, I don't know, just off of his past and try and grab a little bit of something to survive? No, he was fantastic. And some of the, just the way they, really managed the audience and just the whole vibe was fantastic. And here's the insane thing is that I enjoyed it so much. They're going to be in Cleveland in a week and a half.
Yeah,
I'm going back. I'm going back. So it's amazing. I like concerts, but I'm not a guy who's going to every concert that comes to town. I enjoyed it, but they're coming back. I'm going again. I enjoyed it that much. So that's all I can really say to it is just, it was an awesome vibe. I loved the songs, and I was shocked that I remembered like all the words to the songs. I'm like, 20 plus years, I ain't gonna remember. And all of a sudden, boom, it's like riding a bike. All the words are coming out of my mouth.
It's sort of a beautiful dichotomy that the front men of bands have to be out of their minds and a little bit crazy and teetering on the edge of madness. And then we lose them. He was sleeping on a park bench, but you look at people like Scott Weiland and Lane Staley, and there's Axl Rose lost his mind. Yeah. To be a great front man, you have to be right on that edge. And sometimes you go over, and that sucks. But man, while you're riding it. So my Creed thing is I went to college in Lowell, Massachusetts. My wife went to a Creed concert in Lowell with a guy that lived on my floor. they came back afterwards and I stole her. So I always told her, without your shitty taste in music, we would not be together. I don't really, I think Creed's, I listen to the top 10 Creed songs on Spotify. They're fine. They sound like college to me. A lot of bands sound like college to me. I think my problem with Creed was I grew up with 80s hair metal. That was my first love. So unless you had mascara on and was singing about worshiping Satan, I didn't really take you seriously. I think they have a little bit of a religious edge to them. So I was like, it's hard. It's right. I like it. I met my wife because of it, but man, you listen to the songs, college, baby. That sounds like early 2000s. It just brings you back. The shitty beer and keg stands and when life was easy and happy. Plus,
no doubt.
They look so much like, you see Led Zeppelin looks like the 70s. These guys look like 2001, don't they?
They do.
Look at Eminem, Dr. Dre, and Blink-182. Look at this issue of Spin must be unbelievable. They're covering the Napster thing. Oh,
Napster. That's another story for another time.
What a time to be alive. I'm telling you. I don't think we knew how good it was. You never do. You know, this is part of my midlife crisis. You never know how great it is.
30 pounds ago.
30. 300. All right. The next Inception. So Christopher Nolan, much like the Foo Fighters and the Beatles, lives on this list. People love Interstellar, Inception, the Batman series, particularly The Dark Knight. Why do you love Inception?
You know, I love movies in general that make you think, but you can follow along. Yeah. And so I've always been fascinated by anything that explores the mind and dreaming. And because I think it's one of those areas that has not truly been explored. You know, what is really, in that part of the mind? And because it's truly a creative part of the mind. And I think they describe it very well in the movie is, if you think about when you're in a dream, when you wake up and if you can remember it, none of it makes any sense. Yeah. And because you are just creating it on the fly. Your brain is just winging it. And it's incredibly interesting, just this idea of how they are manipulating a person's dream and building within it and navigating through it. So and I don't, the movie's old enough. It shouldn't be any spoilers or anything.
It's fine. It's old enough. You can spoil it.
Yeah. But the idea that they can drop an idea into a person's mind. And that's the other part of it that I love, is it really focuses in on the power of an idea. Because when you're a leader of an organization, the power of an idea goes a long, long way. Because when you are trying to create change or you're trying to create momentum, the power of an idea is something that can really propel and create momentum. In this case, in this movie, he's trying to plant this idea to do the very same thing, create, momentum to help the guy that's hired him to get this character to do something that is wildly crazy, to break up an empire. Yeah. So the power of an idea to me is just the central focus of this, all wrapped into, yes, there are certain things that Leonardo DiCaprio is doing in the movie that is in his personal life that make it interesting as well. But the whole concept is just how powerful an idea can be.
You made a really interesting observation at the beginning too about dreams. It's like, we never know we're in the dream, and as batshit crazy as it is, it never seems crazy when you're dreaming. Right. At no point do you ever get pulled out of, even the wackiest shit could be happening, and it just makes sense. That is an odd thing built into the human brain, right? Just conceptually, that we would have this thing that we do every night where anything goes, wild shit happens, we're not aware of it, and then we largely forget it the next day. That's weird, isn't it?
Yep. It just like the filter is off, and it's just, you think in your conscious mind, the consciousness creates the filter. But when you are dreaming, it is like the filter is gone and it is just raw creativity, raw, just moving forward and just winging it. And anything that comes to mind is just there. And a lot of times it's just snapshot, snapshot, snapshot. And you can be in one place in a moment, and just like that, you're somewhere else, and you don't even comprehend it. You're just there, and you keep moving.
And it's like you're observing without judgment too. It's just things are
Yeah.
happening. You're there. It's very bizarre. So I watched it in the theater when it came out in 2010, and I haven't seen it since. I tried to watch it last night, but part of this midlife crisis thing is my 4-year-old wanted me to play with her bluey things with her. So I like tried to half-ass watch Inception while I was playing. I was like, this is not a movie you can half-ass watch. You got to be in it. You get so I'm gonna try again. I couldn't for this show, but it's Christopher Nolan, I've said this a million times, he is our Spielberg now. Every movie he puts out is an event. You know it's going to be unbelievable. He worked on this script for 10 years. Hans Zimmer did the music. It's something.
And that, I'm sorry to interrupt you. That's another part that makes the movie special. I think one of the most underappreciated things about movies is movie scores.
Oh, yeah.
Because you can have a great script, but a movie score can set the mood, the atmosphere, and build the drama.
Yep.
And there are so many movies that you take it for granted how good it is because of a great movie score. And Hans Zimmer is probably the greatest of our time at developing incredible movie scores.
Yeah. Well, there's John Williams too, predates
a
little bit, but so Christopher Nolan, this is the genius of this man, along with other great directors too, is he obviously gets it, but somebody like Tim Burton, not only is his shit wacky looking, but also he uses Danny Elfman a lot. So like every Burton movie kind of sounds like a Burton movie. We're at the point now where every Nolan movie kind of sounds like a Nolan movie. It looks like it. It sounds like it. It's genius. Creating art that involves actors, a script, music, movies. It's crazy. It doesn't get the appreciation that it deserves. You know,
I agree.
Your next movie, I haven't seen, despite the fact that I come from a military family, but I watched the opening monologue, that 7 minutes where he's in front of the gigantic American flag, and I mean that's a clip from it. He's right, man. Americans love winners. I think we're probably skewed towards loving war, and he just nails it. So this goes back to like that we're insulted by female comedians thing. Like this is who dudes used to be. You know? And I'm not that guy. Again, I'm a Northeast liberal. Don't get me wrong, but this is. Man, that is some American shit right there, Patton.
Yeah, so I graduated college with a double major in political science and history.
Oh.
And World War II really, really fascinated me. And when I started digging, I really wanted to learn more about this guy. And he's a very, very controversial guy. And this is a guy, some of the things that this guy believed in, he was wild. Like he believed in reincarnation. He believed that, he has died multiple times and come back, and that he is just, his spirit and his soul is of a warrior, and that he constantly comes back as a warrior. And it's wild. But I also think he's one of the most misunderstood figures of World War II as well. And that World War II, it's taking a step back, starting in World War I and then into World War II is really when global politics started to rear its ugly head. And Patton was kind of just an old soldier who was just like, let me do what I need to do to just go win.
Yeah.
And he struggled in a modern army where you had to work with allies. And it wasn't all about just, and this is crazy to say, it wasn't just about going and winning. It was about, well, we got to let some other people go win. We got to let some other people go do this. And that was Eisenhower's skill. Eisenhower was a great political diplomat at the top, where he was able to manage ridiculous levels of personalities, which included Patton. And so Patton was just this very misunderstood, guy that he was just this, I don't know how you want to call it, a lion that was caged, that he's just like, let me loose and let me go win this thing. And he had this gigantic ego like anybody else who is very successful. It's just like any company's top salesperson, right? they bring in huge results, but you also got to deal with a bit of it, a lot of times a bit of a diva attitude.
Wide receivers.
Right. So I was just always very fascinated with, how he was managed and just how it all ended for him as well. It was a very bizarre ending for him. And there's a lot of controversy about how he died. The movie didn't address it. It stopped just short, before it got to his ending.
How did he die?
But so just after the war ended, he gave up. He was removed as the commander of the Third Army, and he was reassigned. And so he went out with some other guys on a hunting trip, and he's getting ready to actually go back to the United States on a speaking tour. He's crossing an intersection. He's a passenger in a Jeep, and some truck, a U.S. military truck, just blows through the intersection and hits his truck or hits his Jeep. Everybody else in the Jeep is fine except for Patton.
Jesus.
Patton's neck is broke and he's paralyzed.
Oh, God.
He goes to a military hospital completely paralyzed. He goes through rigorous torture. They torture him. They stick fish hooks into his cheek and yank up on his head in an effort to relieve the pressure in his neck. Right? And something like a week and a half later, he dies.
Oh.
Very, very controversial. Lots of conspiracy theories around it that he was taken out because they didn't want him going on this speaking tour.
Wow. Little friendly fire in there, huh?
So there's a lot of controversy around it. Probably was just an accident, but he was just a fascinating character because he was filled with flaws. This guy was not some Boy Scout, but I think he was just a very misunderstood, military leader of his time that was probably just in the wrong era for the type of leader that he was.
Isn't it crazy to think that World War II, people are going, oh, shit's getting soft. It's like if for as long as humans have been around, they've been shitting on the previous or, oh God, we can't. Because in this speech, he says something to the effect of you're going to reach into the stomachs of the German soldiers and grease the wheels with their guts. You're like, holy shit, World War II was crazy. And evidently people didn't like that as far back as World War II. So I don't know, were we ever as hard and cool as we thought we were, or has it always been like this?
Right.
He also, George C. Scott, won the Academy Award for Best Actor and refused to accept it because he said that you just can't compare one acting role to another. One acting, like he said, I can't be better than that guy. We're all just working with different scripts. Did you know that? He didn't accept the award?
No, I didn't know that, but to me, that's quit clutching your pearls. Take the trophy.
Yeah, just fucking take it and shut up, George C. Scott. Jesus, what do you think Pat would do? He would have accepted that award. Dude, this is the other thing. To be great, like this is a little Scott Stappy. I think to be a great front man, you're going to be on the edge of madness. To be a great military leader, you're going to be on the edge of madness. I don't know.
Yeah, agree.
Speaking of other great Americans, Jesus. that was a good segue. All right, Son of God. Why Son of God?
Look, I left the Bible out as one of my favorite books because, again, everybody puts that up there, and I knew I was going to put this as one of my movies. It humanizes Jesus, and I'm a person that has faith. I know that that's not popular these days, but I don't back down from it. I don't shy away from it.
It's much more popular than you believe. I mean, you got you're doing fine.
But at the end of the day, there's a lot of different movies about Jesus, and like I think about Passion of the Christ has its own place in that it's very, very, it's meant to shock you. Yeah. It's meant to really try and, I don't want to say scare you, but just shock you.
Well, I think it was known, like everybody talked about the crucifixion scene, like, oh, it's going to be, so yeah, I mean, that's not really the point, is it?
No.
It shouldn't be the point.
Right. I think the point of this movie is more of the teaching and more of kind of what he went through. This is more of a story. It's not so much of, hey, the crucifixion, it's part of it, but it's more of the story that led up to it. You know, how did he meet everybody? What was the meaning behind the message? You know, they didn't get caught up necessarily in the granular. It wasn't so much preaching in this movie. It was more of, you know, what did he go through? How did he get there? And then ultimately, how did it all come to fruition and how did it end? And to me, I appreciate more story than preach and shock and awe. Yeah. And so this gave a nice balance of give me the story and something that's palatable, that's true to the event, but you're also giving me something that is not shock and awe. It's not preachy. It's truly just, hey, this is what happened, and we're going to go kind of through the steps, and we're going to tell a story. And you know, there's not a lot of movies that can get me emotionally, but you know, because of my faith, you know, this is a movie that held, you know, some strong emotion for me. And so it's one that I stick to and I'm proud of, and I'm glad that it's on my list.
I take the so I was raised Catholic, confirmed. That was a lot of work. I say atheist to make people mad. I'm mostly agnostic. I just don't care. I take the Kurt Vonnegut view, who's a famous humanist. He's like, religion aside, Jesus is a philosopher. A lot of good points. You know, like if you just take, let's not take religion out of it, like the Beatitudes, Sermon on the Mount, this whole thing. Like, yes, objectively, nice, good things. And I think we can, if we just end it there without any religious wars, you go, yeah, all right, I get behind this.
It's not my place to try and force any belief on anybody. It's my place to believe what I believe and live my life through those beliefs.
Yeah, which is, I think, the best possible way to do it.
Yep.
There's a lot of humans on this planet, you know. We all gotta find some common ground somewhere. I don't think we only have 3 minutes. I don't think we're gonna do all 3 books, but so let's just concentrate on. Listen, it's been a great discussion, but let's just talk about this. You obviously are into military history and war. This is a Civil War novel, yes?
Yeah. So this focuses on the Battle of Chattanooga. So this is kind of where General Grant really solidifies he is going to be the general who's going to win this war for the North. He comes in after his victory at Vicksburg, and General Rosecrans, who's in Tennessee, and he's just suffered a bad loss at Chickamauga, and they're about to get routed. And so Washington brings in Grant and says, you got to get there in a hurry. They're starving. They're surrounded. And Grant just comes in through what they call a cracker line, basically just this very small gap with no army with him, and just works with the army that's there. He's called upon Sherman, who is hundreds of miles away, to try and hurry up and get there. And he's got to work with the army that's there and figure out a way to turn the tide. And he basically uses what he has there and turns the tide as Sherman finally shows up, but he wins this battle and turns them away. And it's a great story of how there's a starving army almost defeated, and he turns it around and ends up beating this army of the South that's on these high ground, has this dominant position, and somehow he finds a way to win.
War is hell.
Yeah,
it's insane, and it was certainly more hellish back then. Like you just said, starving army. The idea that in the olden days, hunger was an issue. Cold was a real issue. Like, you know, clean water. You got shot in the leg. There's you'd get an infection and die. Like, oh, it's impossible to wrap our heads around as people with air conditioning and iPhones to consider what these men went through. It is just batshit crazy. Their families too. They go, I'm going to go off to war. Maybe I'll be back in 3 years. I'd love to write, but you're not going to get it. I mean, it's just unfathomable. Unfathomable. You want to talk about one more? Let's do one more.
Yeah.
Oh, I did want to talk about this one because I'm no big fan of golf, but this book sounds wow. Again, like if you're going to be unbelievable at something, I think you have to be on the brink of madness. And I think Tiger Woods was probably that.
Yeah, this book if there's any book about Tiger Woods I would recommend, it's this book. Now, Tiger obviously doesn't love it, but I think it's a fair book. Hank Haney was his swing coach for several years and was very close with Tiger. It's not a hit piece. It is a fair book. He speaks very highly of Tiger throughout this book, but he does call a spade when there's bad stuff that goes on.
Mhm.
You know, Tiger for a very long time was very protective of when crap hit the fan, that he didn't want it out. Hank calls a spade through it.
Yeah.
But I would say the 90% of this book is very, positive about Tiger, but there's about 10% of it where it's like, look, here's some spots where Tiger was a really crappy human being, where he treated people bad. But it's fantastic behind the scenes view of when Tiger was going through some really tough times and how he dealt with it and how he bounced back. But also times when Tiger was going through some bad times, Tiger was not the nicest guy, and how the people around him had to deal with it. And how Tiger would just have that kind of, like you said, on the edge of crazy, how you had to kind of accept that, because when you are dealing with that level of talent and trying to reach that level of greatness, sometimes you have to sacrifice certain things in a personality. And if you're going to be around that, sometimes you have to accept some of that. And Hank had to start making some of those decisions after, 6 years of working with him. How much was he willing to accept, and how much was becoming too much? And so even though it's a Tiger Woods story, it's also a Hank Haney story of, he was really excited. He had a lot of success, but he also then had to get to a point of how much is, when's enough?
And I think the road to, like, the drive to greatness and the drive to madness, I think those roads run parallel, because books like this, it's one of those, like, don't meet your heroes things. Like, I'm a big Warren Zevon fan. I read Warren Zevon's biography, fucking hated him at the end. Kurt Vonnegut, who I just mentioned, loved him, my favorite author. I read his, hated him at the end. For these people who achieve great things, there's a lot of collateral damage. And I think their drive to greatness, just their singular vision and singular focus, does not do well for their interpersonal relationships and the way they treat other people. And I just think there's some genetic thing that ties these people together. And I don't want to excuse them, but I think in order to achieve these sorts of things, like Michael Jordan has a huge gambling issue. Like, there's something, they just need more stimulus, or I don't know what it is, but
I would say this as well. And this is what I would end on with Tiger is, I think after his car accident where he had his leg rearranged, I think sometimes tragic events in their lives can also reshape their mentality. And so obviously this book was written prior to that. And I could tell you probably in the last 4 or 5 years, it definitely looks like his priorities have changed, much more focused on his kids. Competing at the highest level is no longer his top priority. And it does feel like giving back to the game is more important to him rather than winning. And so I would hope that maybe some of what was said in this book may have resonated with him. His accident obviously had a big impact, and maybe he's starting to turn the corner and is not so much the person you see in this book now, and has turned the corner into becoming a much better human and not focusing so much on trying to be the greatest golfer anymore.
Well, he was just like brought up in a wacky environment. Yes. He was a prodigy as a child. He was a man of color in a predominantly white sport. He was the greatest. Like, just all of these things that's not how normal people live. So there was bound for something,
And this book shares a lot of that. And it was a tough environment that he grew up in. It was not normal.
I'm sure. So a couple of people have recently done Hootie and the Blowfish, and Hootie and the Blowfish talked about the racism that they had saw in South Carolina frat houses. And that's wild. Hootie and the Blowfish. I'm sure this guy.
Who the heck doesn't like those guys?
That's what I'm saying. They're so innocuous. Such a good time singing about the dolphins, and you're like,
right.
Those are the people. Oh my God. Imagine. All right, let's do, we're over, but let's just Too Big to Fail. I love everything. Ironically, I've never read this book, although I've watched a million documentaries on this thing. I just love this subject. The housing crisis, to me, this is why I don't worship anything. As soon as you worship something like capitalism and the dollar, you are willing to do some awful, terrible, really shitty things. And I go, but don't we all love money? Oh, you're right, man. I got to read it, but why do you love it?
I love it because I was in the middle of it.
Oh,
I worked at Chase when this was all going down, and I remember during Chase's acquisition, I believe it was around that time. My don't hold me to this. My time frame could be just off a little bit, but I believe it was when Chase was acquiring Bear Stearns.
Yep.
Everybody in the company got a pre-recorded voicemail from Jamie Dimon.
okay.
And in this voicemail, he said, there is going to be, paraphrasing, a lot of turmoil in the markets, and there's going to be a lot of bad news coming out in the coming months.
Yeah.
Essentially, everybody don't panic. We have enough cash. We have enough capital. We're going to be one of the big winners in this, and you guys have nothing to worry about. And so what did everybody do? They immediately started worrying. But I just remember when I got that voicemail, I was like, I'm out of here. Because I was in the mortgage business. I was a mortgage loan officer. And the markets were already turning. And I remember I had a $3 million pipeline that dropped to about $500,000 in like 3 days.
Ugh.
It was gone in an instant. And so the book resonated with me because I was in that business at least the beginning of it. It's interesting because most Americans have no idea how close the United States was to collapsing.
Insanity.
No idea. They have zero idea that our economy was incredibly close to full collapse and that the United States was about to become a financial desert. It was wild.
Yeah, like at a macro level too, it was because like the American mortgage was such a safe bet. So then they were like, it's a great idea. No income, no asset verification loans, right, guys? Doesn't that make a lot of sense? And then from there, it devolved. But here's the thing too, like just again, macro levels, much, much more than I do. A lot of stuff was like predatory lending, but it was also dumb borrowing. Like the average person knows they can't afford $5,000 a month mortgage. Just because someone's allowing you to do it, which is also very stupid, doesn't mean you should say yes to that. So it's like, I know this is a trope, but a perfect storm of many different factors that were like
a lot of it was adjustable rate mortgages too that did not
balloon
have
payments. Oh my God.
They didn't have caps on the adjustments. Now, a lot of adjustable rates now have caps. They didn't have caps back then. So you might have got a teaser rate at 2%. Right. And then when the rate environment changed, it jumped to 7%. And all of a sudden your payment just like skyrocketed. Yeah. But here's the other thing that a lot of people don't talk about where the book touches on. It wasn't just the mortgages. Mortgages were what everybody talked about.
Yeah.
You don't understand. GE powers the world, but GE had a finance arm. So like when you went to Lowe's or Home Depot and you bought your washer and dryer, or you bought your refrigerator, and you had a Lowe's credit card or a Home Depot credit card, it was financed through GE Capital. And so what were those promos they were running at a time? They were running like 90-day, no interest, no payment. Right? And so you've got that refrigerator in your house now, and you're like, well, thanks for the free refrigerator, stupid, and never paid it. And so what happened was GE, who powers the world, was getting destroyed by their finance arm. And they were about to go under. Then you had AIG. AIG had the PMI policies on all of these mortgages that were going bad. They held like 98% of them, close to that number. So as all these mortgages are going bad, they don't have the cash to cover all of them. So now AIG is collapsing. So now you have GE collapsing, which is powering the world. You have don't even start with the automakers. The automakers are struggling at this time. Yeah. You have GE, you have AIG, and you have all the banks who are holding these mortgages, and then they're also holding these investments called mortgage-backed securities and CMOs, which are collateralized mortgage obligations, that are all going bad all at the same time, which is why all these investment firms had to all find partners to merge together with banks that had fixed assets that could absorb them. This is why you saw banks like Chase, Bank of America, Wells Fargo, Goldman Sachs, all get really, really, really big because the country didn't have a choice. They had to go to these monsters to absorb all these investment houses and all these mortgage companies and all these super regional banks that made all of these bad loans in order to save the financial system. And so today, this is why Chase, Wells, Bank of America, they're all too big to fail. If just one of them were to fail, the financial system probably collapses on itself.
And this is one of those things where you need to know a lot about it to have an opinion on it, obviously, because a lot of people, fuck it, let them fail. Well, you don't understand what it's going to do fundamentally to the system that we all rely upon every day, right? So, but everything is like that. I think uninformed opinions dominate American society, and it's for the worse.
Yep.
Well, listen, you've been tremendous. I learned a lot. What'd you think? Did you have a good time on the old on show?
Oh yeah, man, that's a good time. Thank you for letting me come on.
No problem. Do you want to do a 30-second elevator thing for the bank, or you don't have to? I mean,
no, man. Buckeye State Credit Union. We're in Akron, Ohio, Northeast Ohio, and look, man, our differentiator is we serve everybody, but the bottom line is we also help those in need. If you got challenging credit, we'll help you. We're not like the banks who tell you to get your life in order and come back when you get your crap together. We're here. We'll help you now. We are here to serve the underserved. That's the credit union mantra of people helping people. So that's our differentiator. We're different. We're unapologetically different. So if you're in Northeast Ohio, come check us out.
Beautiful. In Ohio, you can trust you people. Heartland of America, right?
That's right.
All right, do me a favor. I'm going to log off the live, but can you stick around in the green room for a couple minutes so we can debrief?
Yep, you got it, bud.
All right. Well, listen, I'll be back tomorrow, America. It's going to be great. I'll be here, so obviously it's going to be good. All right. Have a lovely Wednesday evening. Enjoy the Celtics.